welcome to Fearless DIY Music. My name is Tristan Lass, and today we're going to begin the process of converting this guitar into a wraparound bridge instead of having a Tune-O-Matic setup with a stop tailpiece. Ideally, I would like for this stop tailpiece to become the new bridge. However, due to the fact that this has no compensation or intonation points on it, it's just a straight bar, we're going to experiment a little bit and try this first, see if this works. And if that doesn't add up to satisfying intonation and action, we'll move to a compensated version of that with intonation adjustments on two little grub screws here that go against the posts, and you can, like, you know, move the bridge back and forwards using these adjustment screws. And then the worst case scenario is if neither of these gives me the satisfactory intonation I'm looking for, I will go ahead and purchase a Gotha wraparound tailpiece that has fine tuners a la the Tune-O-Matic. It's kind of like a Tune-O-Matic wrapped into a wraparound tailpiece. So what I wanted to do is just kind of like talk about my plan, which I just did. So what's the first step? I'm going to remove the strings from the guitar. Then I'm going to go ahead and remove the studs that are holding the Tune-O-Matic in. We'll get those out, and then we're going to plug the holes. So for right now though, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the camera, get some of that work going, and before I remove those studs, I'll fire the camera back up, and we'll see how that process goes right now. And we're back. I have already pried out this post and screw from the Tune-O-Matic out of this side of the guitar. I will do this one on camera, and then we'll go through some of the other finer points that we should be thinking about in doing this conversion. Alright, let's go ahead and see if we can get this out smoothly. It takes a little bit of pressure. And there it is. That looked quite dramatic on camera. Of course, I was using a piece of wood here as my cantilever to go ahead and pry up on the adjustment screw that goes down into the stud, and it popped right out. And it popped out pretty dramatically. Hey, makes for a good video, right? Anyway, if you notice, despite that, there's no damage to the finish of the guitar there, even though we are going to have to plug these holes moving forward. Alright, let's talk about a couple finer points here though. Now with our studs removed, you might be thinking, oh well, you know, we're going to be moving these out to do the wraparound conversion, you know, kind of like fitment and things like that. These studs are going to remain in case something goes wrong with this entire process here. I want to have these as a backup to just kind of put it back to the way that it was originally with the Tune-O-Matic. I know that's not going to happen. I realize too that I'm going to be marring the finish of the guitar to a certain extent around these holes after I plug them and sand them flat and re-drill to put these studs in eventually. However, this guitar is going to be refinished in the future. I'm not too worried about it. So, what happens next? We need to take some dowel material like this, and I'm going to make some wood filler out of water, wood glue, and sawdust. And we're going to get these holes plugged. Then we're going to sand them flat to match the surface of the guitar. And then I'm just going to use the studs that came out of here, screws that came out of these studs for the stop tailpiece. Since we're doing a wraparound, you know, we're going to need these. Those are what are going to hold the wraparound. So we're just going to repurpose them. And rather than sinking the studs into the wood, we're just going to screw these into the top of the guitar, just into the wood. It'll give us some wiggle room when we go to relocate these, and we're going to do our fitment, which means that we will have these screwed directly into the wood of the guitar, and we will move it if we have to, replug if we have to. But what we want to do is we want to go ahead and have the bridge perfectly placed before we commit to sinking the studs in the body, because once we get to that point, we're not stuck. You can always pop them back out, but we want to have everything properly positioned, properly placed for, so the strings remain on the fretboard where they belong, and so that the intonation is as perfect as possible, especially if we're going to use the non-compensated version of the wraparound. So that's where we're headed next. I'm going to plug these holes, and I'll be right back. And we're back. We've got our plugs in. I have sanded this reasonably flat to go ahead and get it matched to the top of the body. And right up front here, two things to cover before I go into what the next step is going to be. I'm trying to preserve the finish on this guitar because a lot of people are not going to be refinishing an instrument if they undertake this project, this conversion. So basically I've been really careful just about getting those nice and level without sanding into the finish and stuff like that. This guitar is going to ultimately be refinished, and these holes back here are ultimately going to be plugged. But for this particular video, we're going to go ahead and just kind of preserve what we have. Another thing of note is that there was no ground wire attached to the Tune-O-Matic. So the ground wires are here underneath these studs for the electronics, the ground wire I should say. So what I'm going to end up doing after I get these holes drilled and I ultimately put the studs in for the stop tailpiece part, I will be drilling a new hole into the holes that will be here, and that way we'll have a ground connection going just to that wraparound, so that the guitar doesn't hum and buzz, obviously. So anyway, I have the blue tape on here to indicate my guidelines for where I'm going to drill. I've drawn lines dead center on both of those stud plugs that I put in, the wood plugs. So I have my drill points already set up, and I'm ready to go ahead and drill. I will not be doing that on camera. I'm going to go ahead and drill those holes, screw, let's see, where are my studs? Screw these directly into the top of the guitar without putting the inserts in, and make sure that the fitment is good. We want to go ahead and do that so that, like I said previously, we've got a little bit of wiggle room if we need to go over a couple mil either direction before we sink the metal studs in for the screw to go into. So I'm going to go ahead and drill some holes, do a fitment, and I'll be right back. Hello, and as you can tell, I went ahead and finished up the project. I have a bad habit when I'm, filming these videos. Every once in a while, I just kind of get into a groove, and I was in a groove when I drilled the holes and got the bridge placed. I placed it, put a couple strings on it. I'll have some pictures up kind of showing some of the, I did take a few pictures. I'll put those up, or they've already been going by, of, I did my test holes, and then I just used the screws to screw the bridge, the wraparound piece, into the top of the guitar, checked to make sure the intonation was pretty close, and it was almost dead on. And then I just went ahead and drilled the holes out a little bit further, inserted the threaded inserts or the studs in, and then screwed the wraparound tailpiece on. I'll do this slowly so I don't spook my camera, but I just use the plain wraparound, just the tailpiece off of the guitar as the bridge. I have been shocked by how well it has intonated. It is just a hair flat, which means it could go forward maybe a ½ millimeter. I mean, it's that tiny. And but it plays great. I'm going to play it here in a second, just to kind of demonstrate the intonation on it. So to mitigate that, when I do my next round of modifications to this guitar, I'll probably take a Dremel tool and I will just sand out a little bit of material on the tailpiece here where it goes around the post so that it'll slide forward just a hair more. Barely any material needs to be removed. I will demonstrate that now by going ahead and showing how it intonates. We'll just listen to, some open chords, and then I'll come up here and we'll do a little D chord slide up, and that should be enough to show you exactly, how the guitar plays in tune. let's go up here. And that's just incredible. The playability is what it was before. I had the action nice and low. Everything just checks out. The radius of this stop bar tailpiece is, it matches the neck just fine. So doing this modification, just getting rid of that Tune-O-Matic bridge and then turning the stop tailpiece into a bridge is a completely viable project for anybody out there. And if you notice, there is this piece of tape here with the wire. I didn't relocate the ground wire because I wasn't planning on going all the way. So I just have temporarily a little piece of copper wire here going from the stud where the ground wire is installed to this wraparound tailpiece so that we don't have unnecessary buzzing while I just did that demonstration. So anyway, if you're interested in kind of having that vintage vibe, having the most minimalist, bridge in the universe with just a stop tailpiece as your bridge, it is a completely doable project and it feels great under the hand. I just love the simplicity of it. Turn my volume back up, but just for like staccato stuff, So anyway, this project was a lot of fun. It's totally doable. If you have a guitar with a Tune-O-Matic and a stop tailpiece, you can totally do it. Now, the question would be, what do I do with these? Well, since I am going to be refinishing this instrument, those will just come out. I'll plug them and the paint will cover, that they ever existed in the first place. However, by doing this project clean like I did, I wanted to show that what you're left with is you have these two studs and you cannot tell where the plugs are or anything like that. It's a good, clean install, and I had to be very careful with leveling those wooden plugs before I re-drilled the holes, but not a big deal. And the top of the guitar looks great. So anyway, it's up to you to decide what you do with those leftover studs if you undertake this project. I hope that you give it a try if it's something you're interested in. And if you've watched the video to this point, a like and a subscribe would be greatly appreciated. Also, share and leave something in the comments. Have you done this modification to one of your guitars? If so, tell me how it turned out. And if you could just use that stop bar tailpiece, or if you went with more of a compensated style bridge. All right, you take care, hit subscribe, and we will see you next time.